What's going on, everyone? This is another Chris course with your host Chris, and in this episode we're going to continue off of our create a newsletter sign up form with Node.js course. So in the last one we were working with body parser and hold the f up. Well, we can at least say thank you. We can say thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you for that.
Welcome back, everyone. This is another Chris course with your host Chris, and in this episode we are going to be continuing where we left off in the last episode. What a surprise. So, you can see right here that this is going to be the end product. Amazing. I didn't have the end product beforehand because I had not finished it, and I just finished this 3 days ago, so this is what we're going to be building. I hope you guys are excited. We have a Three.js piece in the background. You can see if I actually move my mouse and drag, we can actually turn the piece, which is really awesome, just to give it some nice aesthetic flair. And then we have our text that explains what this newsletter is about, when it's going to be sent, and then we have the form in which the user can enter their email address into. Finally, they can click subscribe, and that is going to be the process. They're going to be added to our Mailchimp mailing list, and we're going to be happy because we can send them emails in regards to updates, future updates, and what we're doing within our lives. Perfect. So let's continue from where we left off. If I head on over to this tab right here, you can see this is where we left off. Quite the difference. We have amazing particles, and then we have nothing, just emptiness. So we have emptiness right now, but we're going to make this something great. But first, we need to finish our backend. We need to make sure that when a user submits this right here, their email address, it is submitted to Mailchimp and added to our mailing list automatically. So how do we do that? Well, let's go ahead and make sure this is working just to bring us up to speed to where we left off. So you can see I have NodeMon running in the terminal. I have Webpack running in the terminal. And if a user submits their email address, you're going to see that our Node app is reading their email address and console logging it out into the terminal, basically, which is perfect. That is what we want. But we want to make sure that we're grabbing just the specific email address, not this whole object. So in order to do this, the first change we're going to make is within app.js. So instead of console logging out the entire body, we are going to be console logging out. I got caps lock on, Vim's messing it up. We're going to be console logging out our email, just like that. And that's all you have to do. So with this in place, if we test it again, you can see that now we're console logging out just the email. That is exactly what we want because we just want to send the email up to Mailchimp when we're ready. So the next step is going to be creating a Mailchimp account. Now, if you do not have a Mailchimp account, then go head on over to Mailchimp and go ahead and sign up for one. Now, I already have one ready to go, so pause the video, and when you're done creating one, we'll continue from there. So within your Mailchimp account, the first thing we're going to create is an API key. Now, if you're a little unfamiliar with APIs and API keys, just know that an API key is a long string of characters that we're going to use to access our account's data. We're going to use it to pull data, and we're going to use it to push the user's email address up to our account. It basically acts as a little password for our account rather than actually having to use our username and password to access the data. This is basically the programmatical way to access an app's data is with an API key. So you can see I went over to my profile over here and I clicked the account tab. And now that we're here, we're going to want to click extras. And under extras is a tab for API keys. We're going to click that. And this is where we're going to create our API key. Now you can see that if I scroll down a little bit, I already have an API key created. So you probably do not have one at the moment. And if you don't have one, go ahead and create one. All you have to do is click the button. It'll generate you an API key. This is the magical string of characters that'll allow us to basically access all of our app's data. Do not share this with anyone because if you share it with someone, they can do malicious things to your account, which you do not want because we are the only people we want to access our account's data. So make sure you don't share this with anyone. After this video is done, I will be changing this key because I don't want anyone accessing my account's data. Now that we have this API key in place, we need to now make a list for our account. Now a list, this is basically going to be the data storage for all of our subscribers. So we want to create a list for our newsletter sign up form. So this list name is going to be Chris Courses. newsletter sign up form. And then we need to create a default from email address. This is going to be the address people reply to. So I want to make sure that I put don't reply here at chriscourses.com. And then we need default from name. This is basically a title that represents your email. So my title is going to be Chris Courses. And then we need to remind people how they sign up for your list. This is just something that Mailchimp requires. So you want to say something along the lines of, you sign up for this list by accessing and signing up for my newsletter on chriscourses.com. So they provide some nice placeholder text. How nice of them. We're just going to copy this. Okay, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. So they want us to write it manually. So we're going to say you are receiving this email because you opted in at chriscourses.com. Lovely. All right. So this is all you need to create a list. This is where we're going to store our users' email addresses, basically. Anyone within this list, when we send an email out, they're all going to get our newsletter emails, which is exactly what we want. So we can now view our email list by clicking the list tab up here. And there it is. You're going to see Chris Courses newsletter sign up form. And when I click into this, we don't have any contacts at the moment. So let's go ahead and add one manually for testing purposes. Just go ahead and click add contacts, add a subscriber. And then we're going to add an email address. This is going to be a test email address. Make sure it's a test one. You don't want to add a real one in here, especially if it's not yours. So this email address does not exist, but we're just testing it for API purposes. Once the API is ready to go and we're ready to send emails out, we're going to delete this test one. So we need an email address, and then we need to check this box off saying, this person gave me permission to email them. Like I said, make sure it's your email address. I don't want you guys getting in trouble with Mailchimp or anyone else. So we have at least one email within our newsletter sign-up form, which is good. So now we can test that we are connected to the API and we can pull data from our specific list. So now we have an API key, we have a list, and we have a test email address to test out the Mailchimp API. The next step is going to be actually testing out the API. And in order to do this, we are going to be using an application called Postman. Now, Postman, the reason we're going to be using this is it provides a very simple way to make GET and POST requests without having to use any code. And it'll actually generate the code you need through its interface, which is super, super awesome. I highly recommend using it for any API request you're going to make in the future. So I'm going to go ahead and pull it over here. If you do not have it installed, go ahead and install it, pause the video, and catch up whenever you're ready. So this is Postman. In order to make an API request to an API, we need a few things, but the main thing we need is a URL. You can see if I delete this URL right here, it's saying enter a request URL. And the URL we're going to want to use is this right here. I pulled this from the Mailchimp documentation. We're going to go head on over there in a second, but we want to make a GET request specifically for our list because we want to pull our email address right here to test out that the API is connected with our API key. So if you head on over to the Mailchimp documentation, you're going to see that there is a Get Started button. And it provides you with a very easy to understand tutorial basically in regards to how to get started with Mailchimp API. So I'm going to be showing you how to do this right now, and you can see the first thing we need is this URL right here. So we're going to go ahead and copy that and put it within our Postman request. Now you're going to see that there is this little DC wrapped in two angled brackets right here. I believe those are angled brackets. Carrots? Angled brackets, carrots. Either one. We need to make sure that we get rid of this DC and replace it with a number. So DC stands for data center. We need to make sure that we're contacting the correct data center in order to get our account's data. Now, in order to find our data center number, we need to head on over back to Mailchimp. And if we head back to our account, you're going to see our data center is actually right here. Our data center is going to be US 15. This is specifically for my account. Yours might be different, so make sure that you copy this right here and paste it in where the DC was. So this is going to be the first step. This is the URL that we're going to be contacting in order to make a GET request. So we need to specify now what specific resource do we want to pull from our Mailchimp account. And if we look at the documentation, we should be able to find that. Let's see where it is. Actually, before we get to the specific resource, let's go over authentication. So we can make a request to Mailchimp using this URL, but it's not going to do anything because it doesn't know which account we're trying to access data from. In order to tell which specific account we're trying to access data from, we need to insert our API key that we created earlier. So to test things out, let's go ahead and copy this. And I'm just going to put it in Sublime Text for the time being. And our data center was US 15. Now to test this, all we need is our API key. So we're going to head back on over to our Mailchimp account, and we are going to grab that lovely API key from our API key section. So head back to API keys, scroll on down and grab it. So once you have your API key, insert it after any string. Any string, this is just something that Mailchimp requires in order to authenticate. And now we can just throw this in terminal. And you're going to see we are receiving data. So since we are receiving data, we have successfully authenticated with our Mailchimp account, and this is exactly what you want to see. Now this is where Postman comes in handy. You may be saying, like, why the hell are we using terminal right now when you just said Postman is the way you want to do things? Well, obviously this data isn't very readable, and Postman provides a way to make all of this very pretty print, as they call it, and we're going to be basically making similar requests as this, but using Postman. So we know that we are connected. We know that we're authenticated with our API key, which is perfect. So first thing we want to do is grab our API key from here and head back on over to Postman, and let's see if we can make a GET request. So to authenticate with Postman, you need to click this authorization tab, and we need to specify what type of authentication we want to make. All we need is a basic auth, and you can see that I already have any string here. This is going to be your username, and then our password is going to be our API key. So let's try making a GET request now. If I click send, you're going to see that we are returned with data, which is great. This is all test data. So this is just data associated with my specific account. But in order to get the data associated with our actual lists, we need to specify a resource for this URL. So this is the base URL for Mailchimp API. We now need to add on some extra text in order to specify what kind of data we want to pull. So in order to figure this out, we need to head back on over to the Mailchimp API, and let's see if we can find our list resource. All right, I found it, guys. So this is where you're going to want to be, is under documentation /Mailchimp /reference /overview. Mouthful, but this is where you want to be. So once you're here, you're going to want to scroll down to list, click list, scroll down some more, and you're going to want to click members. We want to get our list members. So you're going to see that it provides us with some resource URLs. We can do things such as create and add a new list member to our list, or we can read and get information about members in a list. So let's go ahead and test this out first because we have a member in there. Let's just make sure that we can connect to the Mailchimp API using this resource URL. So we're going to go ahead and append this to the end of our current URL. And if I try to make a request, you're going to see that we get a 404. The requested resource cannot be found because we need to replace this list ID with our actual list ID. And in order to get this, we're going to head on over to Mailchimp again, our account, and we're going to go to our list, click settings, and then you'd think our ID is in the URL right here. That's what I thought originally, but unfortunately that's not the case. Our ID for our list is actually under settings and under list name and defaults. And you're going to see that this is it right here. So you're going to want to copy this and paste it in where that list ID was within Postman. So now if we try to make a GET request here, you can see that we're returned with data, specifically the email address that is within our list that we created, which is what we want. So we're now connected to the Mailchimp API. We're able to pull data, but we want to make sure that we're pushing data up rather than just pulling. We want to make sure that we're pushing the data from our signup form right here. We want to make sure that we're pushing this up to Mailchimp rather than pulling data from Mailchimp. So in order to push data up, we want to make a post request rather than a GET request. So we're going to switch it just like that. And then we're going to check out the Mailchimp documentation again and figure out how to create a new list member. So you can see it's saying make a post request to this URL. And that is the exact same URL we use to make a GET request, so we don't actually need to change anything. Now, if we scroll down a bit further, you're going to see that there are some required request body parameters. These are the things that are required in order for this post request to work. So we need an email address and we need a status. The status is just an indicator on whether or not the user is subscribed. So the status is going to be equal to subscribed. Let me show you this within Postman. Let's head on over to Postman again, and we are going to need to head on over to body. Now body, this is basically what specifies what data we are sending up to the server. So we have different kinds of formats here, and we want to select raw data because we want to be able to send up JSON because that's all Mailchimp accepts. It does not accept any other data type, so you need to make sure that you're specifying we're sending up JSON here. Now to create and send up JSON, we're going to create some curly brackets, and then we are going to insert, and then we're going to insert an email address field. And let's set it to something hard-coded right now. So chris@chriscourses.com. And then we need to specify our status. So we're going to add that as well. And this is going to be equal to subscribed. Because we want to make sure that the user is subscribed when they make a post request to our Mailchimp account. So once these two fields are set and we click send, that is all we need to successfully push up a user's email address to our account. Let's see it in action. I'm going to click send. And if I scroll down, you're going to see that we have data being returned to us, which is basically an indicator of a successful request. So let's check it out in Mailchimp. If we head on over to Mailchimp, our account, click on our list, you're going to see now we have 2 subscribers. Amazing. And if we look inside, you can see this is the one that we pushed up, was chris@chriscourses.com. So we're on the right track. We successfully made a post request with Postman. Now we just need to integrate this post request within our actual app. Now, how do we do this? Well, Postman makes it really simple. Let's head on back over here. We already have all the data and configuration that we need in order to make a post request. So to get the code for this, we're going to head on over to this code button right here, click it, and you can see that we can get code for this request in a bunch of different languages, which is super awesome. So we're going to go head on over to the Node tab, and we're going to click request. And this is going to be the code we are going to put within our app. Just like that. Amazing. It's magic. It's fucking magic. So we're going to head on over to Sublime Text. Let's get rid of this. And we are going to create a function within app.js called add email to Mailchimp. And we're going to paste the code we just copied within there. So as soon as we call this function, this email address is always going to be uploaded and posted into Mailchimp basically. But we want to make sure that we're not uploading the same email address all over again. We want to make sure that we're uploading the email address that is inputted into this form field right here. So let's see how we do that. Well, we have a function here for specificity purposes. We want to make sure that our code is as legible as possible, and this function name describes exactly what is going on here within it. So we want to make sure that we're calling this within our post request. So when a user makes a post request to our server, we are going to add them to Mailchimp. So we need to add an email argument here because we want to pass in our email. We're passing the user's email into our function. And then we want to replace our hard-coded email with the email argument that we're using right here. Because we're passing in the user's email to our function, and then it's getting passed into our post request. So that makes the whole thing dynamic, basically. So that is really all we need to do in order to make sure that our form is connected to our app and that our app is connected to Mailchimp. Let's see if we can get it working. I'm going to refresh this over here, enter in a dummy email address, submit it. Let's open up our terminal, make sure that it went through. Looks like we're console logging out the body. And then we'll go head on over to Mailchimp to see if this email address actually got added to our list. And if I refresh the page, you can see there we go. So this is a big piece of our app, guys. We now successfully connected our app to Mailchimp. Our email addresses are being added in automatically to our list, and we can now send out emails to all of our individual subscribers. But we're not done just yet. Obviously, this looks a lot different than this over here. But don't worry, it's not supposed to look like that, I promise. But don't worry, guys, we're going to be taking every step along the way to make sure that this form over here turns into this magical thing over here. So stay tuned, guys. I hope you enjoyed this one. I know it's a long one, but it's a very important one nevertheless because APIs are cool. And now you guys have some knowledge in regards to how to connect to other APIs out there on the web. So I hope you all enjoyed, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Later!